one can hide from my sight.
友人の剣をくれ
Cheers, love! The cavalry's here!
And welcome to GG Well Played, where this week was huge.
Seriously, it was ramping up the entire week for a huge explosion on the final day.
We had games that went to an odd distance with the Dallas Fuel versus the Dragons, which was somehow both exciting and also a letdown. It's being taken to Game 5 by the Dragons is a letdown for the Fuel, but not winning Game 5 is a letdown for the Dragons. So there was really no winning once we got to that point.
They went so far, they tasted victory, but they couldn't grasp it.
It's so funny to think. At the beginning of the season, we never would have said that the Fuel were going to be in this position, but the Dragons, their best chance at getting a win all season was versus the Dallas Fuel of all teams.
We thought they were going to be one of the best teams out there. Dragons, we also thought they were going to do pretty good. Preseason told us otherwise. It was just a weird, it was a weird turn of events, that's for sure.
Oh my goodness. So many of the games went the distance, but we're going to talk about the big one.
Which
one
is that?
Ones,
because
I
I feel like this one day, and I'm thinking we're thinking Saturday. Is that right? Saturday, the first two games blew every other game out of the park. There was so much up for grab. The playoffs were on the line for all of these teams. What an amazing series of games.
And I think one of the things that really helped set up that Saturday was the final game on Wednesday, when the Valiant beat the Seoul Dynasty, and all of a sudden we realized, wait a minute, hold on, we have a playoff race here.
These three positions weren't set in stone at all. We thought it was a given. Seoul was going to be in the final three. But no, they lost to Valiant, opening up a race for three teams to get in that third position.
Well, actually, at the start of the week, it was actually up to 4 teams.
Oh my goodness.
4 teams had a shot to make in the playoffs. Now, for the Fusion, it was a long shot. They needed the Seoul to drop like 3 games, the Valiant to lose a game. They needed the Moon to be blue. Like the Fusion had a long shot.
Sure.
But I mean, 4 teams still had the shot, all because the Valiant beat the Dynasty to start the week. I mean, which, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say, I mean, they didn't make it to the playoffs, but thank you for giving us this race, Valiant.
Seriously,
we owe you that.
Yeah, seriously, it made this final week, week 5, in the first stage, so exciting to watch.
And I feel like we've said this almost every week, that the current week was better than the previous one. But I think the finale to stage 1 was by far the best week. I mean, top teams going up against top teams. Boston coming so close.
Wow.
But ultimately falling just a little short. Now, I do have a narrative breakdown. Now, obviously, there's not a week 6. We have a stage break, but let's take a little look at where the teams need to move around and improve a little bit for stage 2. All right, guys, let's take a look at some of the narratives moving forward. Now, obviously, we don't have a week 6 that goes to a stage break in between stage 1 and 2. So what do the teams need to consider moving forward? Well, let's start with Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty, I feel like, needs to shore up their DPS department, whether that's through more intense trainings or practices or picking up potentially a third DPS. I feel like something needs to happen in that department. Wakid and Bunny have both looked good and even great at times, but they're a little too inconsistent, almost losing ultimately to the San Francisco Shock, almost being taken to overtime by the Shanghai Dragons, and it doesn't look very promising. Now, I'm not saying that they can't pull it together, obviously, but it's something where I feel like the Seoul Dynasty needs to reevaluate. Moving over to the Fuel. Now, the Fuel, to me, are a team that have a lot of questions. They've recently picked up AKM, but I don't know if DPS was the problem. I mean, we've seen Effect. Effect is solid. Taimu's good. Seagulls getting the job done. I don't know if DPS was the area that they needed improvement, but I couldn't exactly tell you what's going wrong with the fuel because it just looks like they're firing on different cylinders. They're not on the same page, if you will. And so for me, I feel like there's a bigger question to ask of the fuel is where is their chemistry and can they get it by the time that Stage 2 starts? So let's take a look at the other Texas team. Moving over to the Outlaws. The Outlaws are a team that looked great throughout Stage 1. I'm not going to criticize too much of their squad flexibility as we haven't seen Mendo play yet, and Boink's been in a limited capacity due to the fact that Mercy has been such a prevalent part of the meta. However, I am going to focus on Clockwork. Clockwork is the sub-DPS for the Houston Outlaws, and he's not a bad player by any regard, but one of the things for me when it comes to Clockwork's performances is he is good, not great. He is dependable, but I mean, he lacks some of that big play potential that Jake and Linkser both bring to the table, making him clearly a sub-in player, but the decision to sub him in when and where is interesting. So I feel like a second DPS, one, to add a little more flexibility to the squad, and two, to make sure that Clockwork has someone to directly compete against on his own level, I feel like could maybe help bring out the best in both of those two players while allowing Jake and Linkser to continue being, well, Jake and Linkser. So moving over to the Shanghai Dragons, a team that is asking a lot of questions also of the roster, similar to Dallas Fuel. I feel like they need to pick up a third DPS, someone who plays some of the more off heroes, the Junkrats, the Pharahs, the Genjis. Not that Dia or Undead can't do it, but to kind of lighten the load a little bit on them so they can really focus on honing their own individual Tracer, McCree, Widowmaker play styles. I also feel like either the tanking regimen needs to change, or they need to add a second or a third, I guess, tank and healer to their lineup. We're just not seeing enough out of MG, Roshan, Five King. It's just something's not quite clicking in the tank and healer department, and a fire needs to be lit under the Shanghai Dragons if they want to pick up a win in Stage 2. Ultimately, I'm not going to criticize the San Francisco Shock too much in this regard. They have a couple players just waiting to turn 18. So I feel like for the San Francisco Shock, it's about waiting and making sure that their map differential and win to losses stays within a manageable margin. New York Excelsior and the London Spitfire are both in the same area where they don't need to add anyone to their rosters. And, well, the London Spitfire can't, as they already have the max size roster. But I don't know if I was the New York Excelsior, I don't know if I would add anyone at this point, as we haven't seen a real weakness in the team pop out. So unless they wanted to pick someone up just to make sure if a player gets sick or injured or suspended, that they have someone to fill in that position. Moving over to our LA teams, the Valiant and the Gladiators. I feel like both of these teams, honestly, need just a little more time to synergize. We've seen the Gladiators look great. We've seen the Valiant look great. Obviously, the Valiant just barely missing out on the Stage 1 playoffs, making a big push at the end, and ultimately kicking open the door with their defeat of the Seoul Dynasty for some of the other teams to make it into the playoffs. So the Valiant are a strong team. I don't know if they need to change anything, again, unless they just want to add a little more flexibility or a player to help sub in during sick, injuries, or suspensions. The Gladiators, however, looked weak at times. We saw great performances. We saw a lot of 4-0 performances where they were sadly on the end of that you don't want to be. I feel like the Gladiators ultimately need to shore up their roster a little bit, maybe pick up a couple players, mostly to light a fire under some of the other players on the squad. Surefour, however, at the end of the stage, really started to step up in a big way and looked incredibly promising. Apparently, it just comes down to going back to your old mouse and old play style. Ultimately, that's really how I feel about most of the squads, but we are to the big question. Here we are, the Florida Mayhem. What are we doing? Florida Mayhem, what are we doing? I don't even know. They're a 6-man roster. As of today, they haven't said anything about players that they're really looking into, they need to. I think they need to pick up a third DPS to make sure that Tavik and Logic stay on the point. If they're not performing, you sub them out. It's about winning. It's not about pride. We're seeing interesting looks from healers. Zebasai plays a decent Widow, but it's so predictable because if they're a 6-man roster and there's no moving parts, you kind of know who's going to play what on each map. Picking up a third healer could give that flexibility to open up maybe more looks for the Florida Mayhem. And you know what? Maybe the tanks just need a break and play. Last couple teams we have are the Philadelphia Fusion, the Boston Uprising. And for both of these teams, we saw great looks out of both of them. I wouldn't change the rosters. It's about improving and getting to that next level with those rosters. Don't add a bunch of moving parts because, you know what? We saw early in the season the London Spitfire struggle with moving parts. So for me, I feel like your squad's in a good place. Keep the practices up. Keep the team improving. And if you need to pick up anyone, that will be more noticeable at the end of Stage 2 going into Stage 3. So the big narrative, how are the teams going to change? How are the metas going to affect the teams moving forward as far as the flexibilities of the squad, the skill sets that we've seen, and the new map pool? Obviously, we're going to be seeing King's Row, Hanamura, Volskaya. How did these maps, the meta changes, and the new players affect the league? I guess only time will tell, but let's keep this show moving on.
Wow, I'm really excited to see those roster changes. These teams, especially Florida Mayhem and a couple others, really are going to benefit with the roster being up for grabs for these up and coming players to fill out their roster, making sure that they fill in the roles that they can see that their weaknesses are showing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to finally see a little bit more to it.
And you just gotta hope you make the right signings. Because I feel like if we're talking about this again and we're going, what were they doing signing? That's going to be a little embarrassing.
Yeah, you got to make sure the makeup of the team isn't destroyed by these new people joining, especially with the Excelsior. I mean, the Excelsior, they have such a wonderful team going. Their teamwork is fantastic. Bringing someone in new could really affect them negatively and hurt them.
The only way I could see them bringing in someone new is if, at the end of Stage 2, they're going, we need someone to basically not replace Flower,
sure,
but someone to essentially keep his spot warm.
Right.
Because, so Flower turns 18, the minimum age for the Overwatch League, May 14th. The cutoff date to joining the league by turning 18 is May 5th.
That's so unlucky. I feel like he's just training nonstop, though, for next year. It's going to be... Excelsiors are already a great team. With Flower, they might be unstoppable.
I think one of the things that does open up some interesting avenues is, so the team is already so stacked.
Yeah.
Sabiolbi, Libero, Pine, and with the addition of Flower, how do you give time to all four of those DPS? So one of the things we could also see maybe at the end of this season, maybe not even at the end of the stage, but the season entirely, maybe we see the Excelsior open up some of our first player trade windows where they start negotiating, maybe dropping off one of their players to pick up, something a little extra. Who knows?
I mean, they have a whole bunch of star players already. DPS is out the wazoo for that team. So it would make sense if they want to cover up maybe one of their weaker roles. But seriously, I don't see a weak role yet in their team. So we'll see how it goes.
Definitely not a lot of them.
So that's awesome. The narrative was fantastic, but I'm pretty excited about my play breakdown this week.
You know what? I am as well, as I usually am. So.
That's right. I mean, this week is going to be focused on Dorado, and it's going to be about the defense of the first point.
Okay.
Yep. So let's get into that.
Absolutely.
Hey everyone, welcome to the play breakdown. Today we're going to go over the first point of defense in Dorado. This week we had Excelsior versus Spitfire, two top-tier teams using two different defenses for the first point. I'm going to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly for the first point in Dorado. Let's get into it. All right, everyone. In this defense, we start out with London Spitfire defending first against the New York Excelsior. The New York Excelsior is going to be, hit from a couple of directions from the London Spitfire, but it isn't that much. The London Spitfire is using this defense right now. What they're doing is making sure they're just tagging, slowing them down a tiny bit. They aren't going all out in this defense. And then all of a sudden, they disappear. They fall back and allow the cart to go ahead and take its space. This is called the market defense. They give them the arch, they make sure that they fall back, don't lose anyone, and they're filtering all of the enemy players through 2 points. The main arch, which the objective goes through, and the top right from the upcoming, on the top high ground. This allows them to spread out throughout the market. They have a whole bunch of places to hide, get behind, just a whole bunch of obstacles. You got that fountain, the other marketplaces, and you have the indoor on both sides. You also have that huge castle wall, basically, to get your sniper on, get that long range attacks to. Now that's great up until the point when you're versing a team that takes their time, collects themselves, and knows what you're doing. The bad part about this is if you know that they're just giving you the ground, giving you that market defense, then you can have a Genji, you can have those flankers go up ridiculously and go around them in order to get behind that Widowmaker, that Mercy. They can scale these walls like crazy in order to create that chaos. Now, if this one defense line breaks, then they have the point instantly. There's no way that if you get a team wipe or if you lose this fight, there's no way for you to get back and defend against point one. This is the bad stuff. The good stuff, you have multiple angles to attack from. You have different obstacles and different cover in order to hide behind. It's great. You also have if you can stop them sooner, you have a filtering mechanism for the high ground as well as that arch. You can filter through them, send all your attacks through there, and hopefully get a couple of kills. Unfortunately, the London Spitfire wasn't able to hold them back. But, I mean, they're against the Excelsior, which is a huge, wonderful team. Now, we're going to go into the other type of defense that the New York Excelsior goes up against, defending the point against the London Spitfire. London Spitfire is attacking. They just went through it all, and the New York Excelsior is setting up just like the London Spitfire did in the beginning on that high point. Now, the Excelsiors, they're going to stay there. This is the high ground defense, right? They're going to be shooting them from one point. It's a long range on that road. There's nowhere to run, and they're going to commit all of their firepower on that point, right? The good stuff is this has little to no defense or obstacles or there's really no places to hide for the attacking team. Now, there is that underground path that they can go to, but usually you have that covered with a Junkrat or whatnot. Maybe a Winston can go back there and cover that. But this is basically a battery. You are setting up to just constantly attack the objective, make sure that they're getting, pinned down. That is the good. It's a long path. There's not much places to hide. You can basically see where the enemy's going. You can listen to the enemy. You can do all these things. Now the bad. Both teams crumble on this first point. The Excelsior, they go ahead and get surrounded. You see that Genji coming in from behind. You see that Winston hopping up there, creating chaos. Because they have such a focal point, the attacking team has one place that they can focus their attacks as well. So that's also, if that shield goes down, if they somehow get surrounded, attacked by a Genji or a Winston, you're going to break. It's that simple. If you get close enough to this high ground defense, you can destroy it with a rush in or a dive comp. And that's exactly what happens. And if this happens, if a dive comp takes you out on the defense, they get that first point. The reason why, if they stagger you enough, you have to race. You have to pick all these champions that can run super fast, that can dash forward, that can jump. You need to get back on that defense ridiculously fast. But most of the time, as you can probably see, or if you watch the game, the Excelsiors can't get that. They get staggered, and because they were staggered, they get a second team wipe. So if anything, this point, it's a little bit more dangerous for the high ground. However, I've seen the high ground work more often than the market defense. Sure, if the high ground defense, if you can stop them, you can delay them a crazy amount. If you can constantly kill them, stagger them, whatnot, you can hold that point, which is only halfway to the first point, right? In the market defense, you're letting them get closer. There's good and bads for both. And really, it depends on you and your team what you want to do. In both of these, you need to get your whole team working together. A lot of the times, I've seen in competitive, a lot of times people are using that high ground defense. They don't have the ability to work with their teammates in order to be able to fall back or even stay in the marketplace. You know, they get a little bit too excited. They want to attack. They want to get all up in their business. So the high ground defense usually is the better way to go instead of the market defense. Both are viable. Both have their pros, the cons, and really it depends on what your team wants to do and what you're most experienced with. I personally love the market defense. I love completely and basically and capturing them in this kill zone. I love filtering them. I love seeing all that happen, creating chaos in those 2 to 3, 2.5 really spots where the enemy attacking team can get through. And I hope really that you use these 2 different defenses in your games later. But until next time, this was your play breakdown.
I really enjoy that. It really shows the 2 styles that we see a lot on that Dorado defense. I feel like there's moving parts, replaceable characters, but
sure.
I really like the highlight on, the 2 main styles.
Yeah,
so.
There's pros and cons for both. And really, I think that if you look at every map, look at the points, there are, in a sense, the same. You can do the same thing. Either defend up close, defend far away, try to entrap them, all that stuff. We really just need to take a closer look at all these different types of maps and see where we can create choke points and where we can stop the enemy from approaching.
I enjoy that a lot. I'm going to be excited to hear some of the new ways to do that in future plays when we're out of the Mercy meta.
Oh, I can't wait.
And certain picks are a little more useful.
That's right.
So, one of the things that really helps set the stage for these pro teams is actually what we're going to be talking about in our E-Factor Tip of the Week. So today we're going to be talking about communication, and as I understand, we actually have 2 different points to make about communication.
That's right. I'll let you go first because I feel like my point is a little bit more important. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, it's okay because mine is about staying positive and bringing to the table. It's funny to say, and you hear it actually in a lot of the pro tip guides on how to play better. But since I've added this to my game, I have climbed so much faster and honestly enjoyed the game a lot more. And it's silly to say, but just be positive. And I mean that in both to yourself, don't get too frustrated when you lose a duel, things like that, but asking your team in the beginning of the game, how's your day going? How are we doing? Who do we like to play? For me, one of the big ones I've added is when I pick Widowmaker, because I love Widowmaker, I typically start the game by asking, all right, guys, hey, I really want to play Widowmaker on this map. I feel comfortable. Are we okay with a Widowmaker pick, though? And that little question is opening up the conversation. Most of the time, I get people going, all right, no, I trust you, man. Go ahead.
Sure.
Do it. But because I've asked them for their opinion and I've started the communication with the team, we start vocalizing things more, we start calling out things more. And I feel like that actually leads kind of into your point a little bit. And but yeah, no, staying positive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure, it opens up the communication. And later on, because I've been in games with you where you definitely are the one to initiate that communication. You open it up, make sure that everyone is happy with everything, and then later in the game, I kind of go back and recheck on everyone. I'm like, hey guys, how's the DPS doing? It kind of looks a little bit low. Is everything working out for you? Do you need me to cover anything? If you want to switch, go for it. Really supporting and making sure you ask in a really kind of like a happy, like, we're doing great, guys, but we can do better type of way. If the DPS isn't doing all that great, if you have a Lucio on a non-Lucio map or whatnot, you ask them just like, hey, how's the healing? Where are you in the gameplay? Do you need any help? Do you want to switch to a DPS maybe? I mean, making that sacrifice, making that switch helps a lot for your team, and also make sure that you do it in such a way where it doesn't get them down. Getting them down on negative feelings makes them play worse.
Exactly. Well, because how many times has this happened to you where the switch needs to be made, but because someone gets triggered, they decide, well, you know what? I'm going to keep playing whatever character, probably Hanzo, despite what my team wants or needs because I didn't like the way they asked me.
Sure.
We've all had that happen to us. And you know what? There's been quite a few games where we've played. In fact, I was in a game with behind-the-scenes stat expert NASCAB the other day where we actually had a Hanzo main, because of this communication, apologize for trying to play his character even though it wasn't working.
Hanzo mains never apologize. No, sorry.
He's not a true one. But just because he felt comfortable and didn't feel like we were attacking him just because of the character he chose.
Sure.
And so between open communication with your team, which is more than just call-outs, but keeping track of who's doing what, how things are working, if the tanks are pushing too much, not enough, talking to your healers about how we can change what's happening to them, and keeping up a level of positivity is going to just add to your game a dimension that you're not getting if you're staying quiet.
Not sure. And make sure to do this when you wipe. If you wipe the other team, whatever, make sure it's in a lull where you don't have to make these call outs that are important in the fight. So just do it when it's a lull. And I mean, try it out. It works wonders.
And if you are a player who either can't or doesn't want to talk on mic, you can still listen to your comms and respond during respawns, in between rounds via the typing feature, obviously, in the game. And just keeping up that communication, even if it's non-vocal, helps players know that they can talk to you, to combo abilities, and in general, keep the flow of the game moving. So we do actually have a slightly new order to the show. We're actually going to go into our power rankings, and so I'm going to throw up an image real quick. This is your current power ranking.
So Soul Dynasty crumbling down to 5th. Wow, did not see that in the beginning of the stage. They were on fire, but now 5th.
I don't think anyone saw them falling as far as they have. And to see the uprising in the top 5, I was
Where
so
were
excited.
they? Where were they in the beginning of the stage? Like, I did not see them at all, and here they are in the top 4.
Absolutely. I mean, getting edged out by the Outlaws, though, is understandable.
Sure.
And the Outlaws taking 3rd instead of 2nd was primarily based on the fact that the Spitfires roster is just too flexible.
Sure.
There's so many looks, there's so many different designs and plays they can do.
We've seen Outlaws, once they lose 2, crumble.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so it made it an easy choice for 2nd, and ultimately a pretty easy choice. You go 9-1, you're the top ranked team. The NYXL is your number 1 spot.
Wait a minute. Oh, hey, it's Derek here. Do you want to repeat what you just said? what did you say was the number one team on the power ranking list?
I thought you'd be excited. It's the NYXL.
No, I'm only half excited. And you want to know why? You want to know why, Cynize?
I kind of do.
Because you, sir, need to say the entire name. They will be respected as the number one team, New York Excelsior!
How many O's are in there?
Several.
Okay.
Say those syllables and respect the team. Who's number one? Who is it? Who is it? Yes! Thank you!
So taking that number one spot is the New York Excelsior. And
Thank you!
that does it for the show. That's the end of the stage.
Seriously, this stage has just set up stage 2. We are seriously, I am so excited for stage 2 this entire season. If it is anywhere near as fun, as incredible as stage 1 is, we're in for a treat.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna be nonstop action. We have some content coming out in between the stage. I'm gonna be taking a look in depth at each of the teams. We have the top 10 DPS of stage 1 and a few other fun videos coming at you. But as far as this episode, that's the GG. And keep it well played.